Hello everybody, I am Mrs. Poppet and this is my place. I am so happy to see you again. Our story time is going to be really wonderful today. It's about a boy and a girl and their names are Jorinda and Jorindel. Have you ever heard of them? Well, if you haven't, we'll read about them right now. Jorinda and Jorindel. There once was a castle that stood in a deep, gloomy woods, and in the castle lived an old fairy. This fairy could take any shape she pleased. All day long she flew about in the form of an owl, or crept about like a cat, but at night she became an old woman again. Any young man who came within 100 paces of her castle became fixed like a statue, and he could not move a step until she came and set him free, which she only would do if he had given her his word never to come near again. When any young girl approached, she was changed into a bird, and the fairy would put her into a cage and hang her up in the castle. There were 700 cages hanging in the castle, all with beautiful birds in them. Now there was a girl whose name was Jorinda. She was prettier than all the pretty girls ever seen before. A shepherd lad, whose name was Jorindel, was very fond of her, and they were soon to be married. One day they went walking in the wood so they could be alone. Jorindel said, "We must take care not to go too close to the fairy's castle." It was a beautiful evening. The last rays of the setting sun shone brightly through the long stems of trees upon the green undergrowth beneath, and turtle doves sang from the tall birch branches. Jorinda sat down to gaze upon the sun. Jorindel sat beside her side, and both felt sad, although they didn't know why. But it was as if they were about to be parted from each other forever. They wandered a long way and weren't sure which path to take home. The sun was setting fast. Already half of its circle had sunk behind the hill. Jorindel looked behind him and saw through the bushes that they had, without knowing it, sat down close to the old walls of the castle. He shrank in fear and turned pale and trembled. Jorindel was singing, but her song abruptly ended with a strange, mournful noise. Jorindel turned to see why, and he saw that Jorinda was changed into a nightingale. An owl with fiery eyes flew 3 times round them and 3 times screamed, "To-hoo! To-hoo! To-hoo!" Jorindel could not move. He stood fixed as a stone, and could neither weep, nor speak, nor stir a hand or foot. Night came. The owl flew into a bush, and a moment later the old fairy stepped out, pale, thin, with staring eyes, and a nose and chin that almost met one another. She seized the nightingale and went away with her in her hand. Poor Jorindel could not speak. He could not move from the spot where he stood. At last the fairy returned and sang with a hoarse voice, "Till the prisoner is fast and her doom is cast, there stay, oh stay, when the charm is around her and the spell has bound her, run away, away." Then Jorindel found himself free. He fell on his knees before the fairy and begged her to give him back his Jorindel, but she laughed at him and said he would never see his love again. Then she went on her way. Jorindel prayed, he wept, he sorrowed, but all in vain. "Alas," he said, "what will become of me?" He could not bear to go back home, so he took work as a shepherd in a strange village near the castle. Many times he walked round and around, as close to the hated walls as he dared go, but he heard nothing and saw nothing of Jorinda. At last he dreamt one night that he found a beautiful purple flower, and that in the middle of it lay a precious pearl. And he dreamt that he plucked the flower and went with it in his hands to the castle, and everything he touched with it was disenchanted, and there he found his Jorinda again. In the morning, when he woke, He went to search all over the hill and dale for this pretty flower. 8 long days he sought for it in vain, but on the 9th day, early in the morning, he found the beautiful purple flower, and in the middle of it was a dewdrop, as big as a precious pearl. He plucked the flower and traveled day and night until he came to the castle again. Jorindel walked closer and did not become fixed as before, but he found that he could approach the doors. He was very glad indeed. When he touched the door with the flower, it sprang open. He went in through the court and heard many birds singing. At last he came to the chamber where the fairy sat, with 700 birds singing in 700 cages. When the fairy saw Jorindel, she was very angry and screamed with rage, but she could not come within 200 yards of him because the flower in his hand protected him. He looked around at the birds, but alas, there were many, many nightingales. How could he know which was his Jorinda? While he was wondering what to do, he saw that the fairy had taken down one of the cages and was about to leave, heading out through the door. He ran after her, touched the cage with the flower, and Jorinda stood before him as before. She threw her arms around his neck, looking as beautiful as ever, as beautiful as when they walked together in the wood. Then he touched all the other birds with the flower, and they turned back into girls again and were free. He took Jorinda home, where they were married, and they lived happily together for many long years. Wasn't that a really nice story? I am so happy that Jorindel was able to find something to keep him safe so that he could go in and save Jorinda. Don't you think that was a good thing? I think it's a very happy thing, and they got to spend the rest of their lives together forever. Anyway, that's our story for today. I hope it made you smile, and I hope it made you feel good. I will see you again tomorrow.